So glad you're here for this presentation. Whether you're cozy at home, enjoying a coffee or a milk break perhaps, or even catching on the go, I hope you're all doing great. Welcome to this presentation that focuses on Rizal's vision and nationalism and its representation in Philippine literature. To begin with, let me introduce to you the objectives of this lecture. Now let me give you a quick overview of Jose Rizal's biography. Jose Protasio Rizal Mercado y Alonso Realonda was born on June 19, 1861 at Calamba, Laguna. He is the son of Francisco Mercado Rizal and Teodora Alonso y Quintos. Did you know that Jose Rizal came from a Filipino-Chinese ancestry? Yes, you heard me right. Because of his mother, Teodora Alonso, was of Chinese and Filipino descent. Her family, the Florentinos family, were a wealthy Chinese mestizo family in Baliwag, Bulacan. And later on, during the primary years of Jose Rizal, his parents discovered that he had a good intellectual skill at the age of 3. Imagine. And in 1887, he finished his program of ophthalmology at the University of Heidelberg. And in the same year, he decided to remain in Europe for 10 years, and he wrote his novel, The Noli Me Tangere, or The Social Cancer. He went back to the Philippines in 1887, but it did not last long due to his novel, primarily because the Spanish friars found out that the novel contains an indirect attack towards the Spanish regime, particularly the Catholic Church. And Jose Rizal published an article in La Solidaridad, and in 1892 he went back to the Philippines even though he was exiled due to his writings. Because in 1891 he published the sequel of Noli Me Tangere titled El Filibusterismo. And Jose Rizal founded the La Liga Filipina, a non-violent reform society that was originated from the La Solidaridad. The members of the La Solidaridad were also the members in the La Liga Filipina. It is a reform society organized or founded by Jose Rizal. In 1896, KKK was established, and Jose Rizal did not approve the violent methods of reformation by the Katipunans because Jose Rizal wanted to achieve independence through a peaceful means. And on that same year, Jose Rizal was convicted of sedition, which he was sentenced to death through a firing squad on December 30, 1896, at the age of 35 years old. Now let's identify the meaning, or what is nationalism. Nationalism, according to Jose Rizal, is not simply the love of one's country, but also the ability to recognize the cultural and historical diversity that exists within a nation. He believed that every Filipino should be proud of their heritage and culture and work together towards their country's advancement and progress. He emphasized, or Jose Rizal emphasized, that Filipino should be proud of their unique heritage. This heritage that existed long before the arrivals of the colonizers, and work together towards a shared future of progress and development. So what really ignites the Filipino people to have this sense of nationalism? It is primarily because of the social injustices and the inequalities prevalent in the Philippines during the Spanish rule, emphasizing the need of unity and understanding among Filipinos, regardless of their background. Now, according to George Orwell, nationalism is the habit of identifying oneself with a single nation and recognizing no other duty than that of advancing its interests and those of people who find themselves having major commonalities on their own initiatives, resulting to their identification of themselves to a single nation. George Orwell emphasizes the idea of absolute loyalty to one's nation and the belief that national interests always come first, even at the expense of other countries and or individuals. For example, people who have shared common language, history, and cultural heritage might naturally gravitate towards identifying with a particular nation. If you share the same language, history, and cultural heritage, you have shared the sense of nationalism. Okay? Now let's move on to the next slide, which talks about Rizal's nationalist ideas expressed in his novels, or two novels, beginning with, let's have first the Noli Me Tangere. In Spain, Rizal started the composition of Noli Me Tangere. He reflected the sufferings of his countrymen under the Spanish feudal despotism and the rebellion. And there is always a reason for a certain writer that provoked him to write a story. And just like Jose Rizal, one of his reasons why he made this book was because of his mother. It is always his mother, right? That made him do something, just like being an ophthalmologist, no? To cure the illness of his mother. And the composition of his book was also because of his mother. Because she has been a victim of gross injustice at the hands of a vindictive Spain official of the Guardia Civil. Noli Me Tangere is important to the Filipinos because it was the catalyst to start the impending power of the Filipino to want freedom and independence. His work was an instrument that unified the Filipino identity and consciousness. An example of the convention present in the book was that it was real life. As usually, historical genres takes form from real-life events or occurrences. The protagonists and the other characters was met in real dilemma, conflict, and abuse. It was a message for the people in disguise of a novel. The use of real-life obstacles made it intriguing and moving for the Filipinos. It wasn't made just or written just for the Filipino citizens to see or to read, but to showcase to other nations as well. Rizal depicted nationality by emphasizing the positive qualities of Filipinos, the devotion of a Filipina and her influence on a man's life, the deep sense of gratitude, and the solid common sense of the Filipinos under the Spanish regime. Filipinos becomes more knowledgeable about what had happened in the past just by reading the Noli Me Tangere. Even though the background are non-realistic, but the experience and the struggles of the characters in the stories are reflected in a real life scenario. The novel offers a straightforward analysis of Philippine society under the Spanish rule. The book indirectly hits the most dirty and unseen sufferings that most Filipinos experienced during the Spanish regime. Because no, we cannot neglect the fact that some of the Spanish friars preach with sacredness, but their attitude is different to what they preach, which is undeniably profane. And the Noli Me Tangere gave us power. It was the seed that gave us the idea to stop being ignorant, and it aroused our need for independence and the freedom. Rizal's writing was created to fuel the growing nationalism that will help the Filipinos break free from the shackles of abuse. And for us, or for me, the book was created for power. The power to fuel the people's mind or the desire for change and liberation. Because without the book, even though the Filipino people at that time can't really read the whole text of the book itself is a fictional story, but it contains it contains the hidden truth about the corruption. The book itself is a fictional story, but then again, it contains the hidden truth about the corruption and the abuse by the colonial government and the Catholic Church. Now we have the El Filibusterismo on how is the nationalist ideas is depicted in the sequel of Noli Me Tangere, the El Filibusterismo of Jose Rizal, which was published in 1891. It is a testament to Filipino nationalism, showcasing a shift from the hopeful and non-violent reforms. Because in the Noli Me Tangere, Jose Rizal wanted to have a peaceful means of reformation, but it just worsened the scenario of how the Spanish government treat the Filipino people. They become more violent because they were afraid that Filipino people might um, revolutionize against them. And then it happened because the Filipino people were enlightened by the work of Jose Rizal, the El Filibusterismo, to which it is a more radical and disillusioned perspective. And Simon seeks revenge against the corrupt Spanish system, believing that only violence can bring about change. From a very demure Crisostomo Ibarra to the persona of Simon, which is a revengeful, and it paved way to a novelist or nationalist idea to break free from colonial control and established their own identity. Now let's move on to the next slide that talks about Rizal's nationalist ideas as expressed in Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo have been adopted by the contemporary Filipino writers in English. So we have here Nick Joaquin and Luwalhati Bautista. Each of their works have a nationalist ideas adapted from the works of Jose Rizal. So they talked about nationalism. And then beginning with Nick Joaquin, in his novel, The Woman Who Had Two Novels, this is a woman who hallucinated that she had two novels, and he went to Hong Kong just to remove one of his belly button because he has hallucinated that she had two belly buttons. And this novel explored the struggles of Filipino identity in a changing world, grappling with the remnants of colonialism and the search for a national narrative. He often uses historical settings and characters to reflect on the Philippines' past and its impact on the present, echoing Rizal's call for self-awareness and understanding. Revolving around characters moving between Manila and Hong Kong, the novel is concerned with how Filipinos defined their cultural and national identity with their newly independent country that has been long colonized. Now we have Luwalhati Bautista. Her works such as Dekada 70 have been translated into English and continue to inspire contemporary Filipino writers. Her exploration of social injustice, particularly during the Marcos regime, and her portrayal of strong female characters who challenge societal norms resonate with Rizal's themes of resistance and the need for social change. Because during the Marcos regime, hundreds of Filipinos died, especially during the martial law, and the Filipino wanted to resist this kind of administration because it's just like going back to the time where when we are colonized by the Spanish, American, and Japanese. This time around, it is different because it is a Filipino leader who is inflicting a abusive administration and limiting a freedom of speech for the people to share their opinions, and that ignites people to resist, and they need social change. And her works, like Rizal's, serve as a call to action for Filipinos to fight for their rights and reclaim their agency. Now we have the exploration of themes. We have the Filipino identity and the nationalism. This is an exploration of how these themes shape the modern ideas of the Filipino identity and the nationalism. We have here the shaping of modern ideas of Filipino identity. The Filipino diaspora spread across the globe, where Filipinos abroad grapples with issues of cultural assimilation, hybridity, and the search for belonging in a globalized world. They often maintain a strong ties to their homeland while also embracing the new cultural influences. Next, the use of Filipino languages and dialects in literature, music, and other forms of cultural expression is a powerful assertion of cultural identity. The Filipino languages and dialects is no longer limited to Filipino and English language used in their works. No, We also have a regional Filipino languages and dialects that are being used in writing a story. So we have a Bisaya novel, and then we have the contemporary Filipino identity is increasingly inclusive, recognizing the diversity of experiences within the Philippines, such as it includes the acknowledging of the contributions of indigenous communities, the LGBTQ plus individuals, and the other marginalized group. And then, while embracing globalization, Filipinos are also actively preserving their traditional traditions and values. Now, this includes the celebrating of festivals, promoting traditional arts and crafts, and supporting local businesses. For example, in preserving a cultural traditions and values of the Filipinos, such as the Ati-Atihan, the Sinaulog, these are the festivals that are being celebrated long before the arrival of the colonizers, because such as the Ati-Atihan was celebrated during the 30th century. It is a pagan celebration. It is a depict the animistic beliefs of the people of the Filipino people during that time, and the key differences of shaping modern eras of Filipino identity from unity to diversity, because during Rizal's time or era, it's the Filipino identity sought a unified national identity, while in the modern era, it embraces a more diverse and inclusive understanding of what it means to be a Filipino. Next, we have colonial influence to global interconnectedness. While Rizal's era was dominated by the struggle against colonial influence, the modern era sees Filipino identity shaped by global interconnectedness. One example of which is the Filipino writers. Their writings, such as, are being translated into English, just like Luwalhati Bautista's work. It was purely, the Dekada 70 was purely written in a Filipino language, such as the Bata Bata Paano Kalinawa, but it has an English translation to which the foreign people can also read these novels. So there is a global interconnectedness. The Filipino identity is being depicted from that story written by that Filipino writer. Next, from collective identity to individual expression. While Rizal's era emphasized a collective identity based on shared history and culture, the modern era encourages individual expression of self-discovery. This shifts reflects a growing emphasis on personal values, aspirations, and experiences in shaping individuals' identity. Shaping modern ideas of nationalism. Nationalist movements played a crucial role in decolonization of many countries in the 20th century. The desire of self-determination and independence from colonial rule fueled these movements, leading to the creation of new nation-states and the shift in a global power balance. And then the national sentiments can also be a driving force for the recognition and the protection of minority rights. This can involve the promotion of cultural autonomy, language rights, and the political representation for groups that have historically been marginalized or denied their rightful place in society. And then the nationalism can also be a force of good in international relations, promoting cooperation and dialogue between nations. This can involve working together to address global challenges and climate change, poverty, and disease, fostering a sense of shared responsibility for the well-being of humanity. Because nationalism is a sense of brotherhood or bayanihan. And then the nationalism can encourage a sense of civic duty and social responsibility among citizens. This can involve volunteering, participating in community events, and working towards the betterment of society as a whole. When you have this sense of civic duty and responsibility, you can do volunteer, you can participate in your community events, that develops your sense of nationalism. And the key differences of nationalism during Rizal's time was because it primarily focused on resisting colonial oppression and achieving independence. The modern nationalism, while still valuing independence, is more focused on building a strong and inclusive nation state in a globalized world. And then the Rizal's nationalism was primarily driven by patriotism and the desire for liberation. The modern nationalism incorporates values like human rights, social justice, and inclusivity. In conclusion, Rizal's vision of nationalism as embodied in his works No Limitangere and El Filibusterismo was rooted in a yearning for a unified Filipino identity, a fight against colonial oppression, and a deep love for his homeland. The writers like Nick Joaquin and Luwalhati Bautista explored the complexities of Filipino identity and the impact of colonialism on the nation's side. Although for the Nick Joaquin's work, it is more on the psychological issue or the psychological identity of the protagonist. And for Luwalhati Bautista, it talks about the poverty, inequality, and the political oppression. Both writers have their own unique styles, carried forward Rizal's legacy of social critique and national consciousness. This demonstrated how Rizal's vision of nationalism, though rooted in a specific historical context, continues to be relevant and influential in shaping Filipino literature and the nation's ongoing journey towards self-definition. And that's all. Thank you.